Greetings from the set of Metro and More at Metropolitan Community College, serving more than 50,000 students with over 120 programs at our 8 locations in the daytime, evening, weekends, or online. And I'm your host, Kent Pavelka. Welcome again to Metro and more of what you need to know about Metropolitan Community College. And we are going to be discussing the play 50 Years On, Soul of a Nation. And back with us for, I don't know, maybe the 4th or 5th time, good friend of ours by now, Colin Cox, the artistic director of Will & Company, bringing 50 Years On, Soul of a Nation to Metropolitan Community College, along with the 2 actors with him in the presentation, back for the 2nd time on the show, Anthony Bryce Graham and Yolanda Sanders, who prefers to go by Yo-Yo.
Yes.
Yo-Yo also in the play. Good to have you all. Our guests, all 3, presented the play at Metropolitan Community College in conjunction with the college's Black History Month and Martin Luther King celebration activities here the first of the year. So, welcome again.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Ken. Good to be back.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Good to have you, Yo-Yo. Maybe we'll just dive in, just a real quick review of Will & Company.
Sure.
Will Shakespeare, the
That's how we started.
namesake.
We started as a Shakespeare company, but then as our work became more diverse, we started to address diversity issues. And now we're touring the country with this new series of plays. This new series, very exciting series, 7 plays dealing with the social justice issues that are present and prevalent. A lot in the Supreme Court this year as well.
Yes, that's
a lot of these issues. So we're out there in colleges. Yesterday I was in Oregon, actually performed in a prison yesterday in Oregon. So we're all over the nation looking at the social justice issues and having actors from Los Angeles present them to college audiences around the country.
Yep.
Anthony, you've been with Colin now for how long, working with him on this series?
I've been with him since August is when we started rehearsing, and so we've just been touring the country. I was back here again doing another show, and it's been a really wonderful, very, very, sometimes painful experience, but really joyful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yo-Yo, how did you get involved?
Well, actually, about maybe 8 years ago, I was walking down Hollywood Boulevard, and something just told me to go into his theater that he had at the time. And I walked in, and he said, "Oh my God, I need someone to do my shows." And he said, "If you can come back in 2 to 3 days, I'll give you the script. If you can act, you can be in my shows." So I actually did Faces of America with him an entire summer. We did like 30 shows. And recently, he called me and asked me if I could do this one. So of course, I said yeah.
And you have some radio in your background, right?
Yes, lots of radio.
Yeah.
I started when I was 15, and by 18, I had voiced commercials and on-aired at over 11 radio stations in my hometown of South Carolina.
Yeah, you, where in South Carolina?
Sumter.
In Sumter.
Yes.
And then after high school, Howard University for your BA or BA?
BFA.
BFA.
Howard University, and then on to UCLA for my MFA.
Yeah. And the rest is history.
The rest is history.
And Anthony corrected me. I for some reason thought you were a Southern California native. You got your master's degree at Southern Cal, but you're from back east.
Yep, from Wilmington, Delaware.
Wilmington, Delaware, and a Temple graduate.
Yes, I am.
John Chaney.
Go Owls.
Yeah, go Owls, absolutely. Colin, this has exploded. I mean, it really has for you in the last,
It's gone in phases. I mean, with Faces of America, Yo-Yo can tell you, we did 600 colleges in a couple of years, and because right at the end of the 90s is when they're kind of looking at diversity on campus. A lot of college presidents were like, really had been challenged to look at their diversity. So they did that, and we used to do hundreds of orientation programs. But diversity in the United States has kind of evolved in the last 20 years to what that word actually means, or what multiculturalism in a college setting is. And so now it is becoming more than just like, you and I are Europeans, and Anthony and Yo-Yo are Africans of descent. It's the social justice that's applied to how much melanin is in Anthony's skin. The social justice for African Americans right now is an abomination, as we saw in Ferguson and with all the stuff that's going on. So the contemporary diversity social justice issues are becoming far more layered and far more complicated. And in a sense, back to Johnson 50 years ago, which is where I got the idea. Like, take a look what was going on 50 years ago, and here we are, and how have these issues morphed? Are they the same? Are they worse? And those are the questions we address.
Yeah.
And there are 7 plays in the series. You know, there's a Native American, an African American, a Latino, which we did before. And for each group, some of the issues are very, very different. Immigration, obviously huge with the Hispanic Latino population. But the justice issue goes across the board. You know.
And so you brought this one, Soul of a Nation. This is the 3rd or 4th one you brought to Metro.
I think it's the 4th one.
4th
I know
one?
we did
Yeah.
Faces of America. I don't think, Yo-Yo, you did it
Yeah.
here because we had different ones. But I know we've done Portraits of Courage.
Yes.
And then I think
Latino.
2 of those. So this is the 5th one. Yeah. that we've brought
5
in.
of 7.
5 different. We have 12 altogether. In the new series, there are 7.
In the series, there's 7.
There are 2 other series of plays because we did one, Portraits of Courage, which was African Americans You Wish You Had Known, where we did Colonel Young of the Buffalo Soldiers. So we have historical characters. This one is really like, what are the contemporary social justice issues today?
And that's what got us started on this particular conversation. Was there was a point in time where you thought, I need to focus on this.
Yes.
And then
More than just straight up diversity, more than I'm an African American, here's my story, I'm a Latino, here's my story. How is that matrix now intertwining? LGBT, transgender is a huge issue. You know, and one of the characters we have in the LGBT show is a transgender Native American.
Yes.
So it's no longer just Native American. It's looking at LGBT issues through Native American eyes, which they call Two-Spirits. Two-Spirits is a big concept in America now. This is how it's getting more complicated, more three-dimensional in what is going on in the diversity world.
What are the 7 shows?
7 shows. There's Soul of a Nation, it's the African American. Then there's Wounded Body and Soul, which we did in Oregon yesterday with a Native American crew. Then there is the women's history. There's the Asian American issue. There is the Latino issue. There's the LGBT. And then there's one that takes one from each show. And so it becomes a kind of a compendium of them all that's called Then and Now. So the then being 50 years ago, and where is American diversity multiculturalism today?
Are you doing all of these?
I wrote them all.
I know you wrote them all.
And I'm
but I
in
mean,
them all,
are you still presenting them? All of them are all around the country?
Yes, yeah.
All 7 of these?
Next week, Anthony and I will do 3 of them in Wisconsin.
Wow.
That's 3 in 3 different cities. Yeah.
Well, join us, Anthony and Yo-Yo. What did you learn about this topic that you didn't know before you read the script and got involved?
For me, it was a lot of the inventors, and just a lot of the history, period. You know, a lot of stuff you don't read about in history books in school. You know, there's like 1 page about slavery, and that's it. But there's more to African American people than just slavery. The history goes beyond that. And there's just things that I never knew growing up. And so it was really cool to learn a lot of these things with this play.
For me, I never realized how I was sort of taught and bred to believe certain beliefs about myself because of my color, believe certain things about Yo-Yo as a black woman, and being able to go into those and sort of turn it on its head and really eliminate those limiting beliefs that black Americans can have about themselves in this country. For instance, we were just talking about in the car how black people are taught to behave in certain settings, in a lot of settings, be polite, behave, and oftentimes it cuts you off from actually being who you are, being able to share your true voice because you're stuck in this box of like, all right, I have to act a certain way and talk a certain way to please a certain person. And to be able to work on the process of breaking free from that as a man and as an artist has been a very, very fulfilling process.
Yeah. I would add all of us are kind of reared that way, regardless of ethnicity or racial background. But I understand the nuance. I do.
Yeah. And you get into the issue of white privilege, that you and I are born with a certain privilege and expectation. We do not feel inhibited by the color of our skin, which I think is something that Anthony is. Am I right in the sense of that? Yeah.
I think it's interesting, though, Yo-Yo, you talk about the historical information not basically being very available.
Not at all. Yeah. I mean, the stories today as well. Like, I never knew this, and from the audience, African Americans, I never knew this. Why isn't this taught? You know. Right. And one of the teachers stood up and said, "This is really important. These stories are vital for all Americans to understand all of America." Right. You know, they're not just African American studies or Latino studies or LGBT studies. It is an American story, and America, all of it, should know all of the stories.
Right.
To me, that's vital.
Yeah, it's American
It is.
history. It's not, like you said, it's not color specific. This is America.
And like you said, the information is out there. But it's like you have to search so deep to find it. It should just kind of be available. You know what I mean? Like if your parents don't teach you, or if you don't work with someone like Colin or Anthony, then it's kind of hard to find it. You know, so or go to an HBCU, you could find it there.
In Oregon, we were in Oregon 2 days ago with an audience, a community audience, and there was a gentleman who kind of challenged me, like, why are you bringing these stories? Why? You know, and because they hurt, they're painful, the audience. I mean, many in the audience were like, you hurt me tonight with this story.
That's what I mean by a painful process, like I said earlier. They're painful stories.
They are, but and there was a person that kind of challenged us to not do that. You know, that we've moved on from that. And I said, no, until these stories are told, until all of America knows all of its story, there really isn't any moving on. And yes, you could accuse me of stirring it up or bringing the pain, but that pain is very, very important in the ultimate healing.
Right.
You know, so that's where we are. And that's where, I mean, Ferguson is just indicative of all of it.
Yeah, I guess when what you just said at the end there is important, because I mean, I can understand people saying, well, this is history. We've moved on. As you said, the guy inferred that we have moved on, but have we?
No.
It's that they don't really understand the magnitude of the destruction that's been caused to minorities in this country. And if they did, it wouldn't still continue. Somebody like Colin, who understands, would be more than willing to do something about it.
Yeah.
But they don't understand, so it's impossible to move on.
And the audience member today who stood up and said, you know, if you do not study this history, if you do not get told these stories, you will repeat it. And that's always the danger. I mean, Europe, look at these last rounds of elections in Europe. Nazi parties are getting elected again in Europe, and it's how many? 70 years? We forget pretty quick. It's vital that these stories get told. You know, it really is.
Yeah. So take us through what the play is.
Okay.
And as you do, talk about the characters and the stories, and then you guys tell us who you play.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll start it and then I'll just switch it back to you. But I mean, the intent here, soul of a nation. I mean, for me, that's a very important, because to me, much of African American history, or the African part of it, is really the soul of a nation. It's where I came up with the title. But the other thing is, for example, and Yo-Yo and I have had this discussion, there is a notion that every black woman you ever meet is just this angry bitch, right? And so we've discussed this, and I really wanted to address that notion,
Right.
you know? And so we got into it, and Yo-Yo's, I mean, you know, because it's just instilled in you. We're afraid of black women because they're just going to come at us and be angry, right? I mean, Yo-Yo, do you want to address that?
Well, yes. It's hard to admit these things because you don't want to say, oh, you're right. But it's true. A lot of times, even I'll be somewhere and I'll see like an African American woman, and just because she might not be smiling, I'm like, oh God, what an angry black woman. And it's not true, because I'm not an angry black woman.
At all.
So why would I assume that about someone else? And so it's those things that are kind of instilled in us.
Well, it's the third word that you insert there that's important. You know, you see someone who's not smiling and she's female, angry woman.
Right.
But why isn't an angry black woman?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. So we have a piece.
It starts. The interesting where I got the notion from that. I don't know if you want to see some of that, but
yeah, I do.
Okay. The notion was, I heard the comic D.L. Hughley, and he made a statement. And Anthony, do you want to run what he said? This is what Hughley said.
Says, I never met an angrier group in all my life. I hope he's not watching this. I do not like the way they process. I do not like the way they reason. You can't understand them.
He's talking about me, the angry, bitter, bite your head off if you even smile at me black woman. Is he right? Do we all need attitude adjustments? Or is there any justification to the fact that, as Fannie Lou Hamer would say, a black woman's body is never hers alone? Any justification to the fact that the bird forgets but the trap don't? Any justification to the reason why we hide our thoughts, mask our feelings, toughen up, and never show you our true tears or fears? Any justification to the idea that you have no idea who we are?
And so that was, and I had to look at that, and then studying again. If you go into the literature and you go into the history of what is the American story, you're going to see three types of black women. You're going to find the classic Hattie McDaniel in Gone with the Wind, the mama character. You're going to find the classic Sapphire character, which came from the Amos and Andy show, right? And then you're going to find the classic Jezebel, which is the #1 show today. She's on Scandal, right? She's having sex with the President of the United States. So those are the classic stereotypes. But is that black women? And Anthony asked the question, is that a black woman? No.
No.
No. But that's immediately that's the assumption. They're all angry and they're either Sapphires, Jezebels, or Mammies.
One of three.
And we just need to attack this notion and have this discussion.
So let's back up. How do you begin the play? What happens in the first?
Well, there's a prologue because the story really has never. I mean, if you go, the kernel where it all started for me was people said, "Well, what would you do, Englishman?" Because they broke down English, right? And I said, "You know that thing you call a history book in 9th grade? Throw it out the window tomorrow and start again." And that's what this process has been about, the starting again. So what are the stories that are not in there, that should be, that every 9th grader should know? And so as I came to evolve that, it was like, well, I find these people, but then I was discovering they don't even know the story. And then Yo-Yo starts it with, you're probably going to believe,
Right.
Yeah, do the piece where you're probably going to believe the first Africans were.
Oh, yeah. The first black man to arrive in that part of America we call the U.S., the history books will tell you, was the 19 Nagars on that Dutch ship that landed in Jamestown, Virginia. But they weren't.
See, even that's not true. Now, they did arrive, but the first black man to come to the United States, the first documented black man to come to the United States was
Juan Garrido, he came here 100 years before the Mayflower landed on Plymouth, or Shakespeare's Sea Venture landed in Virginia, and he was a free man. And in fact, he was not only a free man, he was trying to take over this country and all the people in it as a black conquistador with his good friend, Ponce de Leon, and you know what they were searching for, which is the Fountain of Youth, and that didn't end up really well for them. But then, I think, did he go down?
He went across. I mean, he ends with the Fountain of Youth. Ponce de Leon and he are still looking for the Fountain of Youth. But so and I was like, you got to start the story, tell the story. So the play starts with this prologue that takes us through from black conquistadors all the way through. Where do we end it?
How did black men become black men? And that is, after the arrival of the Angolans on that Dutch ship, new arrivals from the sub-Saharan continent referred to themselves as African, or more correctly, by the language they spoke. They were Ashanti from Ghana, Ibu from Nigeria, Wolof from Senegal, but as more came and they were mixed together, different languages and stuff, they just became known as black men speaking black English.
So this is the story. So we're starting the audience with, we need to catch you up on a story you've actually never heard, to then show you where the social issues are today.
So it starts at that point 50 years ago, I assume.
It
incorporates.
To, but I found we had to go back to 1619 to bring everybody, all right, now you're all caught up on what has been the brief history, the 400-year history.
The prologue.
And then we're going to take a look. Okay, so 50 years ago, these were the issues, and how are those issues looking like today? And then that's how we go through.
And so at that point, you have how many scenes in
Today we had 3. I mean, we have a combination, because it depends on the length we have. We have about an hour to present it. So we're going to fill 60 minutes of time with these stories. So once we've caught up on the history, today we address the issues of black women, and then the history of how black men have been perceived in the United States. And then to me, which is the #1 issue in the United States for African Americans, and you guys can chip in if you agree. For me, the #1 issue for African Americans is justice, that they don't get any. That the justice system just isn't blind.
Well, let's take a look. We've got 3 clips from the presentation here at the college, and one of them is, we've already touched on it, the history of black men. So let's take a look at that, and then we'll chat.
Sure, that'd be great. Sure.
After the arrival of the Angolans on that Dutch ship in Virginia, new arrivals from the sub-Saharan continent referred to themselves as African, or more correctly, by the language they spoke. They were Ashanti from Ghana, Ibu from Nigeria, Wolof from Senegal. But as more arrivals came and were mixed together, they became known as black men speaking black English.
The term black in America came to denote not skin pigmentation, but anyone, including albinos, who had discernible African ancestry. As such, the black man is not a color, but a socially ranked racial group.
You may or may not know this, but George Washington, our first president, was a slave owner. And of the 7 founding fathers, he was the only one to emancipate his slaves. But did you know that at the Battle of Rhode Island, the regiment that was honored for having saved the day for Major General Washington against those red-coated Brits was the 1st Rhode Islanders, America's first black man regiment?
Now, whilst good old Nat Turner was busy scaring the crap out of white folk in Virginia, another group of the more scientific black men was busy obtaining patents for their inventions.
William Jennings, the first black man inventor, won a patent for the dry cleaning process.
Ironically, the second black man, Henry Blair, got his patent for inventing a cotton planter.
But the greatest black man inventor of the time was busy in his lab solving a problem that had the whole world scrambling for a solution.
I took thin strips of wood and placed them in a small cardboard envelope. These I then electrically heated in a vacuum. To my eternal delight, it worked. The light burned evenly for extended periods of time and could be replaced for almost no cost.
What Lewis Latimer invented that day, a device that brought the whole world out of the dark. Today, you call it a light bulb.
But as Lewis Latimer worked for a certain Mr. Edison, he was not given any credit for his achievement. Mr. Edison was.
You may or may not know this, but the Supreme Court, the worst decision the Supreme Court ever made in their entire history.
Great job, guys.
Thank you.
Colin, do you perform in this
I
one?
do. I come in and out. I play all the, as I was pointed out to me in Oregon yesterday by an inmate in prison, you play a good, nasty white man. That's I play all the nasty.
Typecasting?
Typecast, yeah. Well, for them as a director, yes. But I come in, I play the generals like the old Civil War generals, and Butler I play, but he's a good one.
Yeah,
Butler's a very
Butler's
good,
really
one.
good one.
But I also play Sherman, and I play those kind of characters, the presidents, and all the white ones.
Talk about the character, Lewis
Latimer.
Latimer, yeah.
Lewis Latimer is the first person to invent a system for the light bulb to actually keep burning. Before, everyone would try to invent these things and the light wouldn't burn for a certain amount of time. But this guy, Lewis Latimer, who also invented the toilet,
The crapper, he invented the drop out of the crapper, yes
he invented a process for it to burn evenly for an extended period of time, and this is what everyone was trying to solve, and he solved it. But he doesn't get any credit for it because he worked for Thomas Edison under, I guess, his company, and then usually, I guess, the inventor or the person who owns the company will get the credit for it.
Edison gets credit for everything.
Yeah.
He does, and he didn't. And Lewis Latimer really, Priestley, the English chemist, was the first one to get the notion to make it burn, but they would always explode. And Latimer was the one. It's thanks to Latimer we have light today in this artificial setting. So, and really, Latimer, he was also known. His book was known as the Bible of Electrical Engineering, and was the text for more than 50 years. And if you go in a biography of Edison today, you will maybe get a mention of his name.
You know what would be fun to do? Just Google the name and
Yeah.
see what you come up with.
You
Yeah,
don't
a lot
come up
of-
with very much. You
'Cause
don't
I'm
come
sure
up
you
with-
have.
I had to
Yeah.
dig real deep to find out, once I heard of Lewis Latimer, what he had achieved, and really how important Lewis Latimer is. The light bulb, This is not African American history. This is the light bulb, and
Yeah.
these are the stories when
Yeah.
we find out the depth and the, in all of our lives, in yours, and not just in Anthony's and Yolanda's life, but I'm English, but all American lives. Lewis Latimer is an important character,
Very.
So
American history.
yeah, so
Absolutely.
and that's the whole of the play. We find these people and we try to, explain to a younger generation or portray to a younger generation. This is a person who you should know about in your life.
It's almost as if we ought to get rid of the nomenclature Black history.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Or Asian American, or
Yeah.
gay history, or better. Yes, I absolutely
You guys
agree.
agree or not?
Yeah.
I don't think I agree with that because, well, I don't think that if we got rid of it, then we would even know these stories. Like the
Right.
only reason why we know these stories is because, it's Black History Month. Let me look up something.
True.
Yes.
So I don't know if I can agree with
In
that.
this sense, I totally
But I
agree
mean,
that-
from the standpoint of it's,
Maybe we should merge it.
yeah,
Better,
for sure.
Better.
the playing field's not even enough yet. That
Yeah.
we
There
have
shouldn't
to.
be any
There
context.
shouldn't be, but there
I agree.
has
Yeah,
to
there
be
has to
at
be.
this point. Hopefully, our grandchildren are
if
sitting
they're
having
willing-
this conversation, saying,
And
"What are you
they'll know
talking
these
about?"
If they're willing to change all the history books and put the American history, the full American history, into the textbooks.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, then sure, yeah.
Then we can have that.
You know what just happened in Texas? You know, the country buys its textbooks based on what Texas buys. This is very important. Texas and California control what Nebraskan kids read is controlled by Texas.
How so?
Because Texas and California buy the most textbooks, educational textbooks.
And so therefore those are the most that are
Schuster
printed.
and Schuster,
Yeah.
they go to what Texas and California want. Texas just removed from their 9th grade history book all mention of Latino Hispanic history. They just took
That's
it all
right.
out.
I saw that. Yep.
So we're going backwards. They said there's no need to tell those stories anymore. Not tell them, they've never told them, and now any mention of any Hispanic in Texan history is taken out. Well, Nebraska kids will read the same book. There will be no mention of Latinos in those books because Texas governs it. It's a very important, it's not trite at all. It's very, very important that these stories go forward.
And as scary as anything is that event, that reality kind of slipped by in just a news cycle and
Yes.
and nobody paid any attention to
I
it.
think where it falls short, though, is that history is often taught just from an intellectual standpoint. And so it falls short because the stories that we're telling, they are intellectual, but they also come from a very emotional place. It helps you understand the depth and gives you empathy for these people who have gone through these, what's the word I'm looking for? Who have gone through
Or a
these hard times.
catharsis or a-
Yeah.
yeah.
And so, but in high school, you don't go into depth at all. All it is just facts.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything to you.
Well, that's why what you do on stage brings the emotion to it. I
Right.
mean, you know, unfortunately, what you see on paper and what you see on a screen is pretty unemotional. It's black
Yeah.
and white, so to speak.
It's the power of the actor. It's what an actor is
Yeah,
trained
yeah.
to do, and that's why the stories, you know, and that's why the audience reacts.
Yeah.
You know, they may say, I knew that number, but I never really understood the emotion of that number.
Let's take a look at something Yo-Yo does with Lucy Parsons. You want to set this up?
Lucy Parsons, again, is a very important character in the history of the movement of the labor force in the United States. She's Native American African, Lucy Parsons. Her husband was hung as one of the Chicago 8. And she, well, the first line, this is what the Chicago police described her as.
More dangerous than 1,000 rioters.
This woman was very, very powerful, and she gives a speech about the importance of the labor movement. Lucy Parsons is responsible for the 40-hour week, by the way.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And nobody knows who it's you. This is an amazing, amazing piece. Yeah.
From 50 Years On, Soul of a Nation, Lucy Parsons,
Yeah.
Yo-Yo, and Colin, you're not in this, but Bryce is, so let's take a look.
Okay.
The Afro-Native American labor organizer Lucy Parsons, described by the police as,
More dangerous than 1,000 rioters.
upon the wrongful hanging of her husband, who had been a member of the Chicago 8, stood before a massive crowd and gave the audience her heart.
I was not at the hanging of my husband because I and our 2 children had been arrested. Arrested. Thrown into a police wagon, stripped naked, searched in every part of our body, and locked into a cell until 3 hours after the execution. But it has been declared that there has been no violation of our humanity, no violation of a wife's right to share her last moments with her spouse, no violation of a son and daughter's need to hug their daddy and kiss him goodbye. And so I fight for the innocent. I fight like the demon they say I am. I fight because the capitalists foolishly believe that by slaughtering the spirits of a labor movement, they will frighten the working class back into slavery. Do you ever wonder why there is a such thing as an anarchist in this great land of liberty? If you do, go into the alleys of Detroit, Chicago, LA, New York. Count the myriad of starving faces that you count as objects of your charity. These people are not objects of charity. They're victims. Victims of your cruelty, your rank injustice, your political betrayal. Look into their faces and you will see why they are anarchists in this country. If anarchy is now to be called liberty, it is the death knell of American freedom. For if it is so, you can have liberty, only if you can pay for it. If not, you and your children shall again forever be slaves. The red flag of anarchy is not a symbol that we believe the street should run with the blood of capitalists. It's a symbol for the brotherhood of man. For when our flag floats throughout the entire world, then will end the prostitution of children, the slavery of men, the hunger of children. Then bread shall be freedom, and freedom shall be bread.
It was 50 years ago that a woman in Rulesville, Mississippi, who as a young girl did pick 300 pounds of cotton, who as a young woman had been sterilized without her knowing it as a part of Mississippi's eugenics program to get rid of poor black folk, defiantly told a judge,
I am sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Stood before the National Democratic Convention and demanded,
Is this America? Land of the free and home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our phones off the hook because our lives are being threatened constantly because we want to live as decent human beings in America?
Today, you know her as the female MLK, the woman who brought the right to vote to thousands of Americans, Fannie Lou Hamer. 50 years on, it is truly fitting that a modern black woman, the fourth kind of black woman, the real one, a hero to millions, should tell us.
I do not consider myself a poor, deprived ghetto girl who made good. I consider myself a person who knew at an early age she was responsible for herself and had to do good. I am where I am today because of the bridges that I've crossed. Sojourner Truth, Ida B. Wells, Harriet Tubman, all bridges. Madam C.J. Walker was a bridge. Fannie Lou Hamer was a bridge.
This hero is the first African-American billionaire known the world over as Oprah.
50 years on, Soul of a Nation, Colin Cox. How did you come up? I mean, how did you make decisions as to what you're going to include in this hour? Because you had a lot of material.
There is, and we have other pieces. I mean, there is a beautiful piece about hair. I love Yo-Yo's hair. About just the cultural importance and relevance of understanding hair itself. And that piece came about, and this is how the process goes. I was at Hofstra University in New York. And after one of the shows, a group of young African-American women came up to me and said, Colin, you have to write about hair. Hair is really important to us. I knew nothing about black hair. I then start going to do the research, and you're like, wow, there's a book just about this. So it's requests by young people to please address these issues. The sterilization issue, which is huge. A young woman came and said, are you aware of the sterilization programs that went on in the United States? I go, I need to go find that out. So it's request by the younger generation about the issues that are important to them and what they want the rest of the country to know about. Yeah. That's how it starts, and then there's a lot of research.
So there's 7 of these shows.
Yeah.
I mean, do they evolve as you get input and things come in, things come and go?
As events happen, as we watch the news, they change. Yo-Yo had a new line added about one of the statistics, which is the...
if you are a black man in America today, you are 6 times more likely to be put in prison than a white man, 19 times more likely to be executed, and this one just came out, 21 times more likely to be shot by a cop, executed vigilante style in the middle of the street because of what's going on today.
And so as it evolves, we all change the script and change the stories that need to be addressed, and that's how it goes on. So it is, and as the audience feeds back to us, like today we had a suggestion that we're now going to go and look at, and we will amend the story on what they want.
What was that suggestion?
There was one on the HeLa cells. I was a biochemist, remember I have a PhD in biochemistry. So when she said it, I was like, oh, I know about this one. There was a woman, she died of, I think, ovarian cancer. And her cells today are used throughout the world. In fact, I myself worked on cells from this woman. And they're used for cancer research. Now, the right to whether she's entitled to royalties, or was there any right? There was no, it wasn't signed away. It's actually quite a big story that's in the scientific world. But someone said, why don't you do that? And I was like, because that addresses the Tuskegee Airmen. That addresses the abuse of African Americans in the medical system. And so that would then go into another story, because today it's about HIV and AIDS in the African American community. And again, the same abuse of power, the same, like the Tuskegee we used on syphilis studies, So this is, so I'm going to go off and study that. And I know that one because I've already done that. So that's how they come about. And then they'll talk to actors just about, what's about like somebody who's moved you? They've come up and just...
I mean, even the guy today, we briefly touched on the sterilization issue that was going on in the state of Mississippi. Fannie Lou Hamer was sterilized without her knowing it. And a man in the audience said that he had sisters, and he was from Mississippi, and 3 of his sisters had this happen to them. And it was just like,
The whole
to
audience.
hear that, oh man, to hear someone who had actually experienced what we were talking about was just so heartbreaking.
It brings again
Yeah.
the point up that you just made a while ago. Too often this is just sterile information.
Yeah,
you
right.
You
Yeah.
just don't relate to. It seems like history, but it hadn't been that far long ago.
And it's right there, you know, and
Yeah.
it's still there, and it helps the younger generation to identify that this isn't a removed fact. This is a part of your life, and something that you need to, because we also make the appeal to them. What are you going to do about this? And that's an important part of the story.
Yeah.
Did they answer that question?
Yeah, sometimes privately.
Yeah.
They'll write. People react in different ways. A gentleman at the end today said, I'm going to write you a story that I want you to tell. But I need your address because I won't go on Facebook and I won't go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is, they do, and people have come up at the end of the show. And I remember there was a young man, a Latino man, who came up at the end of a show, and we had a white character from the Appalachians, so she was a redneck character. And he said, you know, if they call me the various names that Latinos are called, you know, immigration related or whatever, I get really upset. And yet I will use the words against, you know, poor white trash.
Sure.
I used those words
Somehow
and didn't
that's
even
not
think.
pejorative.
He says,
Yeah.
I'll never do it again. I saw that character today, and I'll never do that again.
Yeah.
One at a time, Kent, one at a time.
Yeah. Well, that was the next question. I mean, you do this for a living. I mean, you throw this out and you see an audience, you know, and audiences, plural, receive this information and react to it. And then, so, I mean, how does that make you feel? I mean, what do you think happens after that as a result of what you do?
You know what's funny? Every time we do a show, like, I'll look out at the audience and I make this decision in my mind and I say, I don't think they're going to be able to handle this. Or I say, I think they'll be able to handle this. And sometimes that determines how far I'll go. That's all I have to say.
No, I hear you. Yeah, it's just the dynamic of art.
I love when there are white people in the audience, because I just want I'm telling the story of the people who want to be heard, who are consistently not heard. I think Obama comes out with a speech that I do in the piece, and he says this violence doesn't come out of nowhere. These feelings, these emotions, this protesting, doesn't come out of nowhere. This is a history, and we want you to hear this history and empathize. Put yourself in our shoes to know what it's like to walk around. And so maybe if you do that, there will be less injustice for Black Americans. There'll be less stereotypes for Black men and women. And so for me, it's just really important to open up that dialogue with people who, I guess for this specific show, even with Asians and white Americans and Latino Americans, so the conversation is bubbling and people can decide then what to do with it. Some people come to us and are really fervent about wanting to share a story, wanting to make a change in their community. Some people are really, really defensive. We did one show where the people were defensive and like, but aren't all the Latinos drug dealers and gangbangers up in California? And we're like,
No.
you know, really. And to even, it was nice, but it was good that they had the gall to even speak up and say that, because then it opened up a dialogue in front of hundreds of students where we could sort of like attempt to at least change their minds, or not even change their minds, but let them look at it from a different side.
I guess vocal scorn is better than silent scorn.
Oh,
At least
yeah.
you can
Well,
talk about it.
but also what goes along with this, because in that very, very same performance, actually, we left you and drove to Wyoming, and that was the performance. But I remember a young Latina Hispanic came up to Marie, who was here, after that show, and she said, you just validated me. You're just everything that I am. And Marie, I'm getting moved by the memory of it. And that's the thing also, is the validation for a young Hispanic woman to see this portrayed, never seen it portrayed before, never given the credence or the, this is my country. And I did my ancestors did contribute to this country. And we get that over and over again. Thank you for the validation. LGBT community, thank you for putting a transgender on stage.
So,
Native
as
Americans,
Anthony says, though, I mean, you've got two target audiences. In this case, African Americans.
Yep.
For that purpose, and
For
then you've
validation.
got, and then
The
you've
rest
got,
of America.
and then you got the white.
Yeah,
Not
not,
just the
not
white,
just
the-
white
the
people.
rest
like
of America,
The
Asian
rest of
Americans,
America.
Latinos,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
same. You know, it's
And the conundrum in all of this is that regardless of color or gender or age or ethnicity, unfortunately, that human nature is that people are so myopic about their lives that all they think about is themselves. So,
But there is hope, Ken. There is a hope for younger
Right?
generations. The younger generations
Yeah,
are more
there's hope.
malleable than, you know, you and I, our brains are hard
We're-
set now.
we're-
But younger generations
I'm just
have
speaking
the
for you and
ability.
me then.
Yeah.
Yes, you
No,
are. Yeah.
but seriously though, I mean, it's everybody's everyday lives that they are mostly focused on. It's hard to get people to think beyond themselves.
I think that's okay. That's the nature of a human, is to think about themselves. But when a human decides that it's important for them to fight for other people, that's still about themselves. It's just this issue is important for them.
Sure.
It's still about Colin doing this show. It's just important for him as a man to get these voices, get these stories out there. It still is important to him, though. It's still about him because he wouldn't be in his integrity if he didn't do it.
Understood.
You know,
You know, we have one of the pieces is black men, and to me, it's really important. I mean, he and I are very good friends, very close now.
Well, what about me?
You and I have been friends forever, but you're a black woman.
Oh, sorry.
And you know, but you know, for me, it was that. And if you look, because America's afraid of black men, that would be my. Do you agree with that?
yeah.
Yeah. Still very much afraid of black men. And if you look at the black men issues, and to me, I had to look at why. Why is America afraid of black men? And again, it's the history of how they're treated. It's the history of the story that's been told. And much like the angry black woman, you've got this notion of what a black man is.
Sure.
You know.
It's largely about history, but it's also about today. That you and I don't sit down and get to know each other and talk to each other because we're afraid of each other.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, but where does that fear come from? And it's the same with the Native Americans. I mean, yesterday it was, where does that fear come from? And it comes from not knowing the story. Not knowing, that fear is a subconscious fear. Tufts just did a big study about this. That logically we have cured ourselves of racism. Nobody's racist. We know racist friends, but it's not us. But emotionally, we are far from cured. And it's an emotional, subconscious level
Sure it is.
of why we look at Anthony and we're automatically afraid of him, because to us, he's one of three men. He's either
Right.
Sambo, Nat, or Jack.
Langston Hughes. Let's go to the clip.
Okay.
Put this in context here about in terms of our discussion.
Yeah.
Well, Langston Hughes, because you're going to play it, Langston Hughes is very important in that notion of a black man. And when the Harlem movement came, they were known as the Niggerati. And for the first time, and Malcolm X talks about this as well, about this notion of going to whiteness. And then actually take it over from there, because Langston, in the piece, you'll see how Langston addressed it.
Langston talks about how the worst thing that a black person can do for themselves is to deny their own blackness and try to fit into this mold of what it means to be an American based on white people's standards. And Malcolm X touches on this as well. And so Langston Hughes is just calling for everybody, I think, for myself, to own themselves, own their blackness, their Negroness, where they come from, own your whiteness, where you come from, what your history is, and let that be America. Then this is what he talks about.
Yeah.
I am, this is not black history. I too am America.
Are we gonna,
Let's take a look.
That's what he says.
Yeah. Well, this is a beautiful piece.
Let's take a
Anthony
look.
does great on it.
Brown versus the Board of Education was argued by a giant of the legal system, a kid from Baltimore, the grandson of a slave, who later became the first African American to sit with the Supreme Nine, Thurgood Marshall. He himself changed it to Thurgood as a young boy because he got tired of spelling thorough. When Thurgood Marshall was busy in D.C. taking apart the inequities of the American justice system, his fellow classmate from Lincoln University was busy in Harlem, New York, forging his art into becoming one of America's greatest poets.
The younger Negro artists who create now intend to express our individual dark-skinned selves without fear or shame. If white people are pleased, we are glad. If they are not, it doesn't matter. We know we are beautiful and ugly too. The tom-tom cries and the tom-tom laughs. If colored people are pleased, we are glad. If they are not, their displeasure doesn't matter either. We build our temples for tomorrow, strong as we know how, and we stand on top of the mountain free within ourselves. This is the mountain standing in the way of any true Negro art in America. This urge within the race toward whiteness, the desire to pour racial individuality into the mold of American standardization and to be as little Negro and as much American as possible. America, you need to learn. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and I eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America.
50 years on, Soul of a Nation, Yo-Yo. Anthony, nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've only got about 12 minutes left. I
Okay.
was thinking, gosh, what are we going to talk about for an hour? We can go for 2 hours.
Yeah,
Because one of the things, just in general, that you said at the beginning of the show is that the issue of justice
Sure.
in this country today. You talk about 50 years on. I mean, where do you wind up? What's your opinion of where we're at now in terms of justice?
For me, in a very dangerous place. I think this Supreme Court is the court of Justice Roberts is in a very, very dangerous place. To me, he's trying to undo what was done 50 years ago. He's trying to undo the Warren Court. Not him, but I think where the country is in a whole. I think they will go back and take on Roe versus Wade. I think they're looking to do that. I mean, from United Citizens or Citizens United, they're about to take on same-sex marriage. Let's see how that comes out. I mean, let's see. But there is, to me, a very strong conservative backlash in undoing some of what the Lyndon Johnson call for the new society was, and that's the sense I'm getting. So I think these social justice issues are paramount again, that the fight is back on in many elements.
I don't even know where to begin with talking about how the courts are, like in the piece we talk about how the courts have decided that there's no racism in the college admissions process, and they, took away what was
the affirmative action
the
thing.
affirmative action thing in Michigan, and I don't even know I can't even call it being conservative, because still there's still a humanity in
Well,
being
Justice
conservative.
Sotomayor, I mean,
You know
if
what
you
I
don't
mean?
know, she said that what they're really trying to do is sweep it under the carpet. Justice
Yeah.
Sotomayor said that. She just came out and recently said that about what, because Thomas, he's African American himself, but Thomas and Scalia, they're originalists, right? If it's not in the Constitution, then it doesn't exist. This is the kind of thing we're going back to. They won't allow an evolution of the Constitution.
Yeah.
To me, a very, very
That's
dangerous setting. And where these issues are and what they're undoing with these issues, basic civil rights issues, we really got to watch the court and what it does. I mean, that's at that level. On another level, just as we're seeing, the treatment of black men within the legal system, there are statistics that Yo-Yo gave you, that if just because you're born black, the justice system, she's not blind. She sees the color of your skin. These are urgent issues that we need to be working on.
And they're the same things that happened 50 years ago and 100 years ago, and it's like, where's the progression?
We're not, I mean, and there is that notion, a sad notion that I call out in the play. I come on and say, but it's all better now. Why are you crying? Why are you still crying? You got a black president. What more do you want? And that line's there because we've heard that line.
Yeah.
The audience will tell us that line. But there's a black president. It's
Everything's
all better now.
No, it's not.
And it's just not better yet. You know, I mean, in that sense, that appeal that you make, you know, like for me as a black man, there's a beautiful, just listen to this.
I say for me as a black man, America is...
Oh, who's this character? Is this part
It's
of the
him.
script?
It's in a sense, it's
Me as a
Anthony.
black
Why
man.
don't you deliver it for us to the camera, like you do on stage?
America is... Line.
It's about the bullets. And the bullet in the chair. For me as a black man,
America is a pistol, and the chamber is loaded with bullets of rejection, dehumanization, stereotype, poverty, and abuse. But I leave one chamber open, and that's the chamber for hope. Because as me, myself, Anthony Bryce Graham, as a black man, I love this country. I get to go from the East Coast to West Coast, pursue my dreams. There are limitations socially, but pretty much I can be who I want to be. And it's my hope that one day every bullet, every pistol in the chamber of America pointed at every black man's head, there's nothing but these bullets of hope that's aimed at them. Because right now, like I said, there's just nothing but putting you down and smacking you down. We go through the Michael Brown case, and it's just like, oh man, we lost another one. Eric Garner, you know, the evidence is right on the camera, and it's just like, well, come on, how do we lose this one? So it doesn't feel like we're having any progress.
And Yo-Yo makes the thing with the Trayvon Martin case, like, and like when you talk about had Zimmerman been this, and do you know?
I say every day Black America wakes up, it has to wonder, what is white America going to do? But white America does not wonder about Black America. White America refuses to even talk about Black America. For whatever reason, George Zimmerman followed and shot an unarmed 17-year-old boy on his way home, carrying a bag of candy, talking on the phone with his girlfriend. However way you slice it, you have to believe George Zimmerman is now rotting in prison.
But Zimmerman Trayvon Martin was black, so Zimmerman walks free.
Make the boy white, Zimmerman is rotting in jail.
And if you make Zimmerman black and the boy white, and then Zimmerman will be on death row.
But make the boy black and Zimmerman black, who cares?
Who cares? I mean, but that's, you know, that's where it is. And the justice system also for Native Americans and for Latinos. Those statistics, I mean, 1 in 6 Hispanics will be arrested for no other reason than they're Hispanic. That's a horrible statistic. And that's not to do with immigration and the other thing, a lot of people don't understand. The great majority of Latinos in this country are American citizens. They didn't come across the border, they didn't swim across the river. They are Americans, they were born here. 17%, there are 50 million Latino Americans. And I mean, by 2030, it's going to be 30% of the country. You know, America, more and more and more, is, you know, that's going to become a majority. And America needs to address it and look at these issues of how we're going to address. And the justice issue is, to me, the biggest one right now.
You know, you can't even suggest. I mean, as soon as you suggest one thing, there are people on the other side who are going to argue with it. I mean, this country is so polarized. And so, 50 years on, Soul of a Nation, where are we from 50 years ago? I mean, in terms of polarization, you can't even have a discussion without people just vehemently arguing everything you say.
But that's a good thing.
On either side.
That's a good thing.
Well, it is.
That's what makes America America.
At least we can do that. Yes.
I don't think that's a good thing.
Okay.
I think what happens in those situations where people are arguing is people aren't genuinely listening to the other side. So you could talk to Bill O'Reilly, who says it's all better now, because they feel threatened that their ideologies are wrong, and it's just like, listen, this is why we open this dialogue. Listen, put yourself in my shoes, and until you do that, don't argue. I mean, I get in an argument with my girlfriend. You get in an argument with your wife, and you don't move on until you put yourself in her shoes and feel what she feels and empathize with what she feels. It's the same thing for Black Americans, all minorities, and even white Americans have a view on what is going on, and it would be good to put ourselves in their shoes.
Yep.
But people are arguing back and forth. There's no listening, and there's no change that can happen.
The
in that.
fear and the anger and the emotion get in the
Yeah,
way of
exactly.
communication
Exactly.
and understanding.
But you have to face those things in order to understand and move on. You just have to talk about it, you know?
You have to get underneath the anger and the fear.
Unfortunately, in the American dialogue, most of that occurs, with us watching television, like you said, and unfortunately, that's showbiz. And so you got moderators and hosts leading the conversation that they forget about the conversation and the importance of the conversation, and it's winning the conversation.
And a soundbite to go to commercial.
And Colin will get on me about this all the time. If I'm angry and I'm speaking from an angry place, he will stop me. And he'll be like, Anthony, what's really going on underneath that? But me in this anger talk is just me coming from a surface level and not really sharing myself and not even listen. Like sometimes I won't even listen to him where he's saying, I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not angry, blah, 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 you know? But that doesn't get us anywhere. But when I'm able to stop myself, listen, and go into what's really underneath that, which is usually pain. That's why I said this process is very painful, because I've had to face a lot of it. Real growth and real change is able to sprout from out of the ground.
Yes,
Anthony is living testimony to the fact that the best artists are also psychologists. You know what I'm saying?
You have to be. But
you do. You have to have a level of understanding about what you're trying to accomplish. And
yes, and that anger thing is really important. And Yo-Yo's kind of on the other side of it. She stays away. I think because of the black woman stereotype. Is it that fair?
Well, I mean, I really don't know. I just have a really great life. I'm happy, and I just.
Good
things
for
I
you.
can't connect to.
Good for you.
But there is.
There's room for that too.
There is, and that's where we all want to be. But
Yes,
there
it is.
And when these issues touch, because a lot of the actors, I think Marie went through it the same as well. They suddenly discovered there is an anger hidden there that they've shied away from, that they haven't touched.
Just wait till you get older.
Yeah.
You'll be plenty angry.
I'm trying to let it go right now.
Yeah, you'll let it go, and then you'll grab onto something else.
Yeah.
You know, you'll grab onto something else, and in the end, I don't know, because I haven't gotten there yet. But speaking of the end, we got 2 minutes left.
Okay.
What do you want to share?
Just in the continuation of that, I think that the fear of having the discussion, and I think I've certainly found that as I've done all 50 states, 600 colleges, that for young white Americans, there is the fear of having the discussion. And I think I would entreat minorities to engage young white Americans in the conversation. And please invite them because I find many of them don't know how to have the conversation because they're afraid of offending. And I think we have to set a parameter on how that conversation can take place. And I think that will ease it up. That's my appeal.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm just thinking about like Bill O'Reilly and him arguing with Jon Stewart, and how much I saw a man who just wanted to hear his side of the story and hear his opinion and hear himself talk.
And win.
And win, like you were saying. And the dialogue, that's not a dialogue. That's a monologue. And I can't say the word I was going to say.
Diatribe.
No, I was going to say a
Well, it
nasty
is,
word. But that's someone talking to themselves, with themselves, and not really engaging the other person.
Yolanda?
I know we have 46 seconds, so I'm going to agree with both of them.
Very good. 50 years on, Soul of a Nation, Will and Company. Thanks, guys. It was great.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
We'll see you again.
So much.
And thank you for being with us again on Metro and More. Our goal is to better acquaint you with the mission, leadership, and the reach of the college. I'm Kent Pavelka for Metropolitan Community College.
This has been a MetroVision production produced by Metropolitan Community College.